Aloha, everybody, and welcome to probably the most informative YouTube you'll ever watch, because my goodness, this is stocked with so much information that I thought I knew a lot about menopause, and holy Hannah, women, get your hands on this, because I'm like making notes everywhere and I have so much to talk to you guys about, but I can't even cover that in an hour. I mean, it's just, there's so much information. This is amazing.
Thank you.
And second of all, like the box, the what should I say, the book launch was so much fun. Like there's like so many goodies in here. It was like super fun to just like, I don't know. I just loved the whole book launch. It was wonderful. Congratulations on a book, because y'all know this is not an easy feat to write a book.
No, thank you so much.
It was just so awesome. And I have so many questions to cover. I've been like out running around in the rain, the fire alarm's going off, so I look like a drowned rat, but I'm so excited that you guys came, and thank you for your flexibility. And now I lost my pages. I don't know how I got. You covered just about everything.
We tried.
So, I mean, I don't even know where to start, but I have some notes. But like, kind of like to pique everybody's interest, you talk a lot about like the skin. Like, why does our skin change so much? And like, once perimenopause starts, like every year after that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why it's changing so much?
I mean, I'll kick it off with two words, but it's called estrogen receptors, and they're in the skin. Estrogen helps us to create collagen and, these things. And it should be important to note, because I think sometimes, Maria, people expect that, well, we're not ever going to age or change. And we certainly will, even with estrogen on board. But I mean, it just slows down skin aging so much. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to.
Can you like...
we need what happens to a lot of women is we get that dry, crepey skin, right, as we age. And it's due to this loss of estrogen, as Maria just said, and the loss of these receptors are essentially being starved. They're going into like a desert-like status. And when we restore estrogen, we essentially plump back up the skin. We are able to handle our collagen matrix. I mean, I think this is why so many women are like dumping loads of collagen in their, drinks and whatnot. And they're like, but my skin's not changing. And it's like, because we still need those constituent pieces of our old self that are able to kind of utilize that collagen, put it into the cellular matrix, like actually make the skin rejuvenate. And it's something, I mean, Maria and I joke, but it was one of the first things I saw when I started back on hormones, was because I love my grandma. But she had that paper thin skin, and I was in my 40s and I'm like, why do I have crepey skin? What is happening? No idea that it was related to my declining hormones. And then once I started HRT, it wasn't with the goal for my skin, because I hadn't connected the two, but literally within a month I was like, oh, and not just that, I was holding on to moisturizers better, which I think is another thing that women, we're just constantly slathering on stuff, thinking that from the inside out is going to, or outside in is going to help, but it's really an inside out issue that we need to address.
Yeah. So you're saying that we can restore it if we've lost it?
Yes.
I would say to a certain degree.
Yeah,
right?
to a certain degree.
We're going to still age, but I think the whole message that Kristin and I try to bring forth is we can age an awful lot better than what we tend to see.
Yeah.
I know there's like a lot of debate about this estrogen face cream, because they say it's not absorbed into the body, but it's going to help with the skin. Is that true? Like if you put it on your skin, doesn't it get absorbed?
We both have experience with the estrogen face cream. It's not as new as, there seems to be a lot of advertising of it.
I know. I have it in my cupboard. I've had it for like many years.
And I believe, Kristin, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it's really estriol. I don't think that they typically have estradiol, or if they do, it's a very tiny dosage.
Well, that's the new products do, but it's the concentration is so low, it's pretty much non-existent.
Tiny. And so here's the thing. I mean, so I've been using HRT for, I think, almost 9 years now. And, Kristin and I both tried different formulations. Some creams had progesterone in them. They all had estriol for sure. Kristin, we may have even tried like a formulation by someone who compounded it, that might have even had like a little bit of either thyroid or insulin in it. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but
one of the two. It had
something like a little bit. It was a compounded, not by one of these commercial And quite frankly, like I didn't see any major benefit. And people have to understand that estrogen really works at the systemic and receptor level. And when you are using an adequate physiologic dose of HRT for whole body health, it will have effects on the face. Like we don't necessarily need
all these products.
Nothing wrong with it. If you want to kind of go and try for yourself, fine. Nothing wrong with it. But I think it's probably overkill and unnecessary and probably just a waste of money, is my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, that's like super helpful to know. I mean, because we're all, looking for that secret to
100%.
Good skin. But I just thought that was interesting. I saw like a dermatologist. They were at like a menopause, some menopause conference, and there was a dermatologist talking about how great this estrogen face cream is. But you always have to take that with a grain of salt because you just don't know what's true, what's not.
I'll say who it would work for really quickly, because I know that there's some women, in your demographic that this matters. Is, let's say a woman is within the 5-year window of just having had breast cancer or something that's, hormone driven. She can't necessarily take, some can, but some can't take systemic estrogen. So, but she's concerned about her skin. She'd be a great candidate for something like this, right? It's not going to have near the impact that a systemic dose of estrogen would be, but it's going to help just the aesthetic appearance. So like those, I think there's a place for these products. I think what Maria and I are going to push back on is there's this huge menopause groundswell. There's a lot of financial opportunity for all of these companies. They are preying on us women as we age because they're kind of hitting on those aesthetic vanity points. Yep. And so women are like, I'll do anything, I'll do anything. And it's so the vast majority really just need systemic estrogen. The messaging's not there. But I would say there is a small group for whom those products could be helpful.
Right, because we're going to get into it, but that's not going to help the other issues that's going on, whether you're feeling them or not. But it was just, I do those conference or the keto retreats, which I hope that you join me on one of them. And one of them was, we always get into these conversations, and she said that she's on HRT now because her dear friend said, honey, something's going on. You are just not, first of all, you're not yourself anymore, but you just don't look like yourself anymore. Like she could just see it in her skin and her moods.
Yeah.
Something was going on, and she got, her hormones tested, and she wasn't in full blown menopause, but she was already low in those hormones that once she was on it made her feel better. And I had another question. She also had fibromyalgia. And once she started testosterone therapy, completely went away. And the more I talk to people, because I work with a lot of people with fibromyalgia, and when they do get their levels tested, their testosterone's tanked. Is there a connection?
I mean, testosterone is wildly over prescribed, we think right now. We hang on to our testosterone a lot longer than women are being led to believe. It's, the basket of hormones that really fall off the cliff are going to be estrogen and progesterone. I would say estrogen is highly impactful on joint pain, musculoskeletal pain. That is one of the first signs for me and Maria if our hormones get low. Mm-hmm. And it is like women we're like, this is either aging, or I had that old knee injury, or I just worked hard in the gym or something. And we forget that it's actually very much driven by our hormones. And women might ask why, but it has to do with the joint fluid and the tensile strength of our ligaments and tendons and kind of how our muscles are able to recover and things like that. So there's a relevancy to fibromyalgia and pain like that with respect to estrogen. The testosterone, we do aromatize some of our testosterone, meaning we convert it into estrogen. So I don't know if that is part of the impact that some of these people are feeling. But there is also an adrenal component. And we do know that when our adrenals are dysregulated, pain is sensed more, right? It's our heightened pain response. So is it that we're kind of getting some of these testosterone androgens in that are sort of mimicking some of our adrenal hormones, and therefore it's helping us with the pain? I don't think they really know, but we don't want to deny women's lived experience. I mean, if they're feeling better with these things, that's great. We would just ask them to think, is testosterone the primary hormone of women's health? And so should that be the major crutch that they rely on? Because we would posit that they're going to get the same benefit from estrogen. So maybe we go with the hormone that actually drives all the other processes in the body.
Right. Okay. That makes total sense. I love it. A lot of women ask me, if I don't have any symptoms, why should I even care? I think this is huge. I think this is really big because I don't sleep poorly. I don't have hot flashes. Like, why should I care about HRT? Like, why should it be on my radar? Could you answer that?
Sure. I would love to start with that. Like just let's play. How old is this woman who's saying she doesn't have any symptoms? Just, it's an imaginary woman, Maria. How old is she?
She's 57.
Okay. Okay. So maybe she was fully, menopausal at say 52 or 53. Okay. So she may have a little, you've called it a bit of a halo effect. Estrogen still hangs around. Maybe she's able to aromatize a little bit from testosterone, or there's a little bit of coming from the adrenal glands. And she feels okay. But even if that's the case, the truth is, come and speak to us when that 57-year-old turns about 62 or 63, because that halo is gone. Mm-hmm. And we know for a fact that these processes in the body, which you cannot feel, the microarchitecture of the bones changing. You cannot feel the tau deposition in the brain. You cannot feel that your blood vessels are becoming stiffer. Okay. You don't feel those. So Kristin and I would say if there's one thing we're incredibly passionate about is getting women to realize you do not have to have symptoms. We are such an incredibly symptom-focused society. I mean, all of really Western medicine is built on managing symptoms, whether that is with green medicine or pharmaceutical medicine. It's about managing that which you can see. That's why the book takes the reader on a journey of understanding, thank you, of what is really happening behind the scenes, whether or not you have symptoms. Yeah. So we would say it's great that you don't have symptoms, and we actually do want to address your symptoms for women that have them, because symptoms are not good, but no symptoms aren't the opposite. No symptoms does not equal good. In fact, almost, now that I think about it, I think having symptoms is going to be better because it's going to get you to pay attention.
Yeah. I mean, I would say too that we have to be honest as women. We are like strong ladies. We persist, look at just the challenges of the last 2 years in your personal life, Maria. Hasn't slowed your business down. I mean, it's probably drained you a bit, right? But you just go. And I think as women, whether it's careers, partners, families, our own businesses, whatever, like we figure out a way to make it happen and make it work, notwithstanding what's going on. Part of that process is we normalize symptoms. Yeah. So these women who say like, I don't have any symptoms, I usually once Maria and I start talking to them, we can kind of find some holes in that logic, right? And then it really is about, no, do you have the same sex drive as you used to? Does sex feel the same? Are you getting the same vaginal lubrication? Like, we shouldn't necessarily lose that. That's not a normal course of aging that we need to accept, right? And is your hair the same? A lot of women are like, my hair density is changing. They don't realize that. So they focus on the big nuggets. I don't have a hot flash, right? Or, I don't, whatever. And we're like, but, has your blood pressure changed at all? Most women will look back and go, oh yeah, my blood pressure was slowly creeping up. Even though it was still within normal, it was slowly changing. How are your lipids? We suddenly think that like, oh, our lipids are scary and dangerous. Boom, when we turn 50. And a little bit of elevation, if doctor's throwing a statin at you. Well, ladies, guess what? Your lipids need receptors to clear them in the liver. And guess what regulates those lipid receptors? Estrogen. Mm-hmm. So that's where, even if they don't have symptoms, we would say they probably do. Mm-hmm. They just aren't aware of them because of the fact that we will do whatever we have to do to get through the day.
Right. Are you familiar with Dave Feldman?
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Cholesterol dude. Yeah, I love him. But I'm wondering, like, I keep kind of bugging him to connect this, like women going through menopause, or if they have like low progesterone and, estrogen, like how that's affecting their cholesterol. Because I don't think they're connecting that at all. I haven't heard him talk about that at all. And I think that, we need to connect that.
Yeah. 100%. And Maria and I have done experiments on ourselves. We're kind of nutty when it comes to that. We go get our blood drawn like every quarter, and we're talking like massive panels, including the NMR lipoprotein profile, which is one of Dave Feldman's favorites. And I have an entire spreadsheet going back over the last 6-7 years that shows what Kristin's lipids and metabolic markers were, what happened when I started HRT. And then another step is what happened when I started supporting my thyroid. And that's another piece of kind of the aging process that's hormone related that also is going. And I've done nothing different, Maria. Like you and I, we've been aligned on the whole nutrition and movement and everything forever. All that stayed the same. And yet I've had this drastic improvement in lipids that had started to kind of get a little wonky in my 40s. So, the evidence is there. We've got studies showing it, et cetera. And this is something that we don't have to be a society that's so dependent upon pharmaceuticals. We just need to get to the root issue of these things. And I think it's hard for women to understand that might just be their sex hormones.
Cholesterol makes hormones, healthy hormones. So when they're tanked, it's going to go high, right? So let's put you on a statin, right? Mm-hmm. I can't even tell you, like Maria, what you said about how we manage these symptoms, because my husband just had surgery. And so all these medications that they gave him for pain or whatever, they also gave him like Miralax for the constipation and an acid blocker for his digestion. And I was like, whoa. I was in this meeting, like what he needs to all take. And I was like, we're not doing that. We have digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid and like apple cider vinegar. We don't need that. I was just like, Miralax, like, come on.
Right.
I don't know. I was just frustrated because like on top of the 3 medications he needed, there was like 5 to manage all of the things that like cause those. Anyway, I was frustrated, but I love that you brought up the thyroid issue, because I love this chapter that you have, thyroid pause. Tell us what's going on with, people, I'm not giving away what's going on in this book because there's so much information. These are just like little nuggets. You're going to want to get this book because the thyroid pause, I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on with her thyroid? Because like we've all noticed it.
Yeah.
Thyroid can slow with age a bit as well. It doesn't happen to everyone and can happen at different rates, but the difficult thing though is that, a lot of the symptoms of low thyroid can kind of coincide with the symptoms of perimenopause. And it's like this end. We don't necessarily have to say, oh, well, it's just your thyroid, right? So women have to realize that these things are kind of very much often happening concurrently. So a lot of we're big fans of just really looking at the thyroid and, eating in a way and supporting the thyroid through nutrition and lifestyle. But hey, similar to what we do in terms of replacing sex hormones, we're perfectly fine with, thyroid medicine for women that need it as well. And I think a lot of women feel like, oh, if they have to do that, they're failing. They're not holistic enough. And don't buy that.
No, but I get really I like that you brought that up, Maria, because there are some like carnivore doctor experts out there that say, like if you just eat carnivore, I don't know if they're like eat a stick of butter and you don't need HRT and this and that.
There are, right. It's particular.
We know who they are. And some of them are colleagues of ours and I love them to death, but they're also young. And they're not, I'm like, talk to me when you're 60. Let me know how that worked for you, and I don't mean that pejoratively, but there is a certain element of dragging yourself through perimenopause with phenomenal metabolic health, right? If you've got the movement dialed in, if you're managing your circadian rhythm, if you're eating properly and you're getting enough protein and all these things, you might be able to hang on a little bit longer than the average bear when it comes to these issues. But it's going to fall and it's going to happen hard and fast. And this is one of the reasons why we just love our clients in their 60s, because they're mad. And I don't blame them for being mad. They're like, why did no one tell me? And we're like, you were probably a picture of health coming into it. You weren't obese. You didn't have all these things that were the obvious issues. And so your doctors are like, you're good, and then you kind of normalized a couple things and then you aren't good. And now what's scary is, can you reverse osteoporosis? There's some evidence, maybe some reversal, but might not get your bones back to 30, And can you reverse blood pressure? Hopefully, can you get rid of the deposits in your brain that are causing cognition changes? No, you can't, but we can mitigate some of these things. But so that's why it's like these carnivore docs, one of them in particular is an NTP fellow of mine. I adore her, but she's just way off base, and they just need to kind of, their own personal experience is not the gold standard.
But like you said, it's like we're failing if we need to go on HRT. It's like they think that I've heard them say like, we didn't use that our ancestors didn't use that. And it's like, they died at like age 37.
As a Brenda, our favorite thing is when women goes, I want to go through menopause naturally. I'm like, okay, well, I'll come to your funeral at 70. It's just, this is not a valid explanation or choice to be making, perfectly honest. It's just silly to think that we didn't have, shelter problems and antibiotic problems and all these things that were changing the life cycle. And even so, if you look at now women living longer, we're not living better longer.
I was just going to say, we deserve better.
Yes. And I just agree. Do your cold plunges, do all the things you think you're going to make you to live to 110. But at the end of the day, what quality of life is that from a health perspective? And the data is very clear. If you take age-matched men and women in 100, around age 100, the men are having a much better experience in life than the women. So we can kind of go round and round about, HRT didn't exist, but I mean, hopefully you caught the chapter on the history. We were using HRT with traditional Chinese medicine folks thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a new concept. And I think that's what people need to understand. Even in the early 1900s, it was standard of care to recognize hormonal deficiency as a risk for chronic disease. And HRT was seen as preventative. It was used and it was preventative back then. What happened in between? We don't need to get into the cynicism, but big pharma, pharmaceutical interests, profits, patents, all of those things kind of started to intervene and women lost. I mean, it's at the end of the day, we're the sacrificial lambs in that approach to medicine. So.
Well, I just want to pause and say, I'm sorry that you're not getting bigger. I feel weird that I'm the big person in the picture, but I mean, it's going to change whoever was talking. But another thing around that thyroid pause, you talk about our livers are getting fat and why this matters. And again, I'm not giving anything away. This book is just stocked full of information. Could you talk to us a little bit about why are our livers getting fat?
It's really our lifestyle for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's metabolic derangement, but if you look, there's going to be a lot of women who say you don't need to gain weight during menopause, or these things aren't going to change during menopause. But the studies they disagree. We do have a change in our metabolism. We do have a change in our insulin sensitivity. We do have a change in our gut microbiome, which impacts our metabolism and our metabolic health. And so these things are all happening due to the loss of hormones. And sadly, women's response isn't helping. We're under eating, we're over sugaring. There's sadly a bigger and bigger reliance on alcohol for women to kind of cope with things as they go through. And what was interesting is when we were writing the book, the term was non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Mm-hmm. By the time we were finished with our manuscript, medically, the term has now changed. Yeah. And it's a metabolic disease of the liver. Wow. So the recognition is there that fatty liver is very much driven by our metabolic health. We know that the loss of sex hormones has a huge hit on our metabolic health. And unfortunately, women are not leaning into healthy habits like they could be. And so there's this horrible storm that erupts.
Well, you didn't touch on this, but maybe this will be a fun fact. So I work with these teenagers and they had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And we get into it and they're like, no, really, I'm an athlete. I don't drink. And I'm like, well, let's talk about what kind of athlete are you? They were all swimmers. Sitting in a chlorinated pool for hours in the morning, hours in the evening. So we're sitting in hot tubs drinking the wine, the wine in the hot tub. I will not go in a chlorinated pool. I just won't, because I just worked with too many kids that everything is getting absorbed into our skin.
Yeah. We do have to be really, really aware of our environment. And I think that's, women are so scared of hormones with respect to something like breast cancer. And we're like, that that's not a hormone. Hormones don't cause it ever. What causes it is usually our environmental exposure. And we need to be really aware of that, because unfortunately, it's not something that we can sort of erase our past on. And I'll admit, I mean, Maria, you and I grew up in the Midwest. My summers were Memorial Day to Labor Day on a lake, having cans of Diet Coke, eating Doritos and a can of bean dip. I mean, I can't undo that, right? And so it kind of makes me have to be double down on lifestyle interventions today to try and mitigate the effects of that, kind of past. But, we're the low fat generation, we're the snack wells generation, all of that stuff, horrible skincare products, tons of pesticide use, all these GMO grains. I mean, that's just our reality. So women avoiding hormones, we kind of are like, that's a fool's errand. Let's just address, our environment and what we can do.
Right. But even like you were saying earlier, I just want to kind of hammer this home. A carnivore diet, high protein diet, that's going to be great, but it's not going to prevent this stuff from happening. It's just not going to stop it.
The
It's
only
going to make maybe the
thing
symptoms
hormones is hormones.
Right.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Right. We get older. It happens, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you have a whole chapter on the microbiome. How does poop relate to hormones? Your book is funny too. Let's just say that. It's an easy read because you're laughing halfway through it.
Good.
Well, actually that funny writing it, but thank you for saying that. So hormones have to first be made, and then they have to signal at the receptor, and then they actually do have to exit the body. And poop is one significant way. It's not the only way that it exits the body. So when women are not pooping or constipated, that's a big problem.
That, and we also have we need a really abundant and diverse group of bacteria in the gut. And very few people realize, these hormones, I think we focus so much on fertility and menstruation that women think that, our boobs, our uterus, our ovaries, and our, cervix and vagina, those are the things that hormones drive. There are estrogen receptors lining the lumen of the gut, lining it all over. And when we lose the signal at those receptors, we start to lose that microbial diversity. And you look at the incidence of IBS, IBD, Crohn's, things like that start to hit women in that 40s to 50s range. It's not coincidence. And we start to look at, just being more vulnerable to parasites. We know that the gut can drive obesity, right? We know that the gut can kind of change the way our metabolic health expresses inflammation, cytokines, all that kind of stuff. So when we lose that hormone signal, we lose that kind of balance, that homeostasis within the gut, and it can translate into a whole host of problems. So then the interesting thing is, if thyroid is slowing alongside of it, which we say it eventually will, the thyroid actually affects peristalsis and the movements to make our bowels continue to transit through. And so this happens for a lot of women around the same time. And there's a huge phrase out there right now, menobelly. Okay, well, there's two things there. One, you've probably got a poor microbiome. And two, you've lost your insulin direction signal from the estrogen. So now all your fat that used to be on our hips and butts goes right to our belly. So you've got this bloated, chunky belly. And people want to blame it on menopause. And we're like, no, we're blaming on the fact that we're estrogen deficient and we're not replacing it.
I'm glad that I was 16 and I just realized I can't eat the ice cream like my friends after swim practice. I had to give those foods up a long time ago, because now my friends that are 40 some, they're like, oh, Maria, they ate so much junk. I remember they got sick because we were on a car ride to go skiing in Colorado, and they were just eating all the Twizzlers and all the things, and I'm eating like a beef stick, and they ate so much junk they got sick. But now they're in their 40 plus, and they can't eat that way anymore. And it was much easier to change my habits at 16 than it is when you're 40s, 50s, 60s, and you don't have, you have basically insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And you don't sleep well, which is causing more insulin resistance.
Yeah. And when you're not sleeping, you don't feel like getting movement in, and you maybe miss the sunrise, and you're staying up too late at night. You become a night owl. Maria loves that term, night owl. Every time a client says it to us,
I'm not a night owl.
Me neither. No, I'm the first one to bed in my whole family. I go to bed before my kids do, because I love the morning.
They're at that age too, probably, where they're a bit staying up late, and you're at the age where you're getting to bed earlier and earlier.
But Maria, you always say there's no such thing as a night owl. This is circadian rhythm, right?
There will be doctors who tell you there are sleep chronotypes, but if you are a night owl and you're pushing 1 in the morning, you probably having issues with cortisol that are keeping you awake, and you've been kind of habituated into that can be broken and dealt with, but there has to be a desire to want to change.
Sure. Oh no, I'm all about the cortisol. I put my blue blockers on about 5 p.m. and it's just, I have some good habit, because I suffered with sleep issues when I was in my 20s. And so I was always aware, sleep is so important. It was really important for me to stay on my diet, for me to want to exercise, for my moods.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know how people survive on 6 hours. I just can't. I don't know.
No. And that was, Maria and I talk about it. She has battled, I would say, harder than I had to kind of reclaim sleep. But the two of us in our 40s, the amount of sleep loss that we experience, and it's, let's face it, your kids are at that critical age where they're go. You've got to be kind of eagle eye mom on what's going on around them and you and everything else. and we feel like we're dragging ourselves through mud. I mean, Maria and I had 7 boys going through the adolescent stages in our 40s. And I look back and think, oh my gosh, I was white knuckling it. And a lot of it had to do with the sleep disruption. And that's, a piece of it. Women are thinking, why can I not sleep? I just lie there with this busy brain. It's like, well, we need GABA to get into your brain to calm it and be quiet. And to go to have GABA across the blood-brain barrier, we need progesterone metabolites. And then to stay asleep, that 3 o'clock in the morning when we're all waking up, that's your sleep architecture getting off because you have no estrogen or declining estrogen. So there's so much to sleep that is relevant to sex hormones. And I don't think women appreciate that, and then it affects, like, are you going to make great food choices when you're dragging through the day because you only had 4 hours of sleep? No. Are you going to make it to the gym or even just get outside and do stuff? No. So it becomes this horrible cascade that just compounds itself for women.
I like that you touched on this so much because, like, I'll pick on my mom a little bit. She won't, I don't know if she'll watch this, but like, she's like, oh, Maria, I sleep great now. Well, she's in her 70s. So she's like, oh, I sleep great now. She was on HRT many years ago, but she stopped in her 60 something because that was, when all the stuff was going. And she's like, well, should I start again? She's like, I sleep great, but she takes a Tylenol PM, which I think is really bad for your brain health.
Right. And your gut and your liver.
Oh, I know. Right. But, she sleeps great. When should we stop? Or should we never stop?
Never.
We say it all the time. You'll pull it out of our dead cold hands. And I mean, we have clients who started in their 70s. Now, are there different considerations for a woman who's 70 and older, who's never been on hormones? Yes, it's not a fatal flaw to start later. In fact, we had this groundbreaking study this year finally showing that more than 10 years post-menopause, older than the age of 65, which have been the traditional cutoffs, there's no reason to impose those limits on women any longer. And, maybe we want to look at heart health. Maybe we want to do a coronary artery calcium scan, make sure that we're not going to, trigger any sort of stroke risk or anything. It's not the hormones that do it. It's the mobilization of plaques that does it. And it, kind of this whole cascade, but there's no reason to not consider it. And there's no reason to come off at all.
I guess the reason to not consider it, I have some family members where cost is an issue.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start crying, but like, why is Viagra covered by insurance, but this is not?
Right.
Because I see them suffering terribly, but they can't afford it.
Right. But there are, Maria and I say all the time, we go through a pretty deep dive of forms of hormone therapy and regimens and methods of taking it. And we try and really educate women on a broad spectrum and recognize that people across the world have different options and different choices. So we needed to kind of embrace that. But the reality is there are insurance coverage for these things. And if this is horrible, Maria, but we will tell clients who are older and maybe on Medicare, we'll say, go tell your OBGYN that you're having horrific hot flashes. Yeah. It's standard of care. They are required to give you hormone therapy. So if you can't fake, bones being, holy in a DEXA scan, which perfectly frank, if you ask for a DEXA, you probably have some form of osteoporosis. Guess what? They have to give you hormones for that, or tell them that you've got a hot flash, and it should be covered by insurance.
Well, my family lives I grew up in a very small town, and a family member, she's dealing with a lot of these issues. Yeah. And I was like, you got to talk to your doctor about this. And Dr. Jackie's like, no, you are not doing it. I'm like, you got to go to somebody else because she's uneducated. Right. But there's not a lot of options. So I get so frustrated, but there are online people like you, but then you have to find someone to prescribe, right?
Yeah, she could maybe have some luck. Not exactly our first choice, but again, we want to be inclusive. She may have some luck with the online kind of telemedicine platforms to prescribe for her.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We match our private clients with providers. And so they're not left hanging at all. Like we have a very large network of providers that we work with. But like Maria said, there are, what is it, Marie, like Joy Wellness, Eye Medical, all of those, MIDI Health, all those. We see it's kind of hit or miss for some of those. Sometimes they're not using the best forms and regimens. The thing that cautions us is that you do want a provider who's invested in your outcomes, not just writing you a script. Right. Right. And so that's part of the issue. But I think if she finds an OBGYN who, is focused, let's say, on anti-aging, that's usually the great sign to look for is someone who holds themselves out as kind of this longevity anti-aging specialist. Mm-hmm. They're going to be all up in support of giving you hormones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
A chapter on midlife changes. You talk about autoimmune issues and changes, and like, why is it that during this time you see so many people with Hashimoto's or MS or rheumatoid arthritis? Why is that prevalence higher after menopause?
It's estrogen maintains the kind of function of the immune system. So when it's gone, the immune system is going haywire. Even if one does not have autoimmunity, the immune system is still going haywire. And we even saw it during, the kind of virus year, generally speaking, who did better, right? Women. And that was due to estrogen. So yeah, the immune system is really becoming uncoupled and dysregulated as we age.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So I know that when women are pregnant, the immune system starts to circulate to protect the fetus, because it's like this foreign object.
Right.
And I know like selenium can help once you give birth, that immune system calms down, because you don't want it to be in overdrive. But I wonder if that has something to do with the hormone.
I believe during pregnancy, the immune system is a little bit suppressed. Yeah. That's, again, genetic material of the father. We don't want that rejected. Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. But can we discuss the bladders? Because I've talked to many women with UTIs to the point where my mom's friend, she's like 70 some, she almost died because she had such a terrible UTI.
Yeah.
What can you do about that? I know, let's talk about that.
Well, so UTIs are usually triggered by a Clostridium or some sort of similar overgrowth of bacteria, right? Why are those bacteria allowed to overgrow? Because the pH of the vaginal tissues has changed. And what regulates the pH? I feel like a broken record. Estrogen. So, we have that. We also have uterine changes that can happen and sort of start to crowd the bladder, especially if you've had kids. And so now we just don't have the same sort of emptying. And then we also have changes in the laxity of the ureters and the urethra coming down. And then we also have changes in the tissue strength. And so we get this huge change that can first start as UTIs. Some women start to get very tight in their vaginal tissues. They aren't able to empty fully. So there's just a kind of whole cascade of things that can happen. UTIs are so not uncommon. In fact, Maria and I, this last year, I was in Norway and I got a UTI literally the day we were supposed to leave for an overnight hike on top of a mountain. And I looked at my husband like, we got to do something. So we found a private doctor. I confirmed, yep, I got a UTI. And it was probably from my overseas flight and I wasn't drinking enough and whatever. But then it started this cascade. Like once the bacteria sort of were able to take root, all of a sudden I was dealing with UTIs every single month for 5 months straight. And I didn't want to be on the antibiotics. I was like, is this kidney stones? Could it be something else? So I went to go get it checked. But the reality was, even me, who was on systemic HRT, my blood serum was great. We knew exactly how it was expressing in the body. I was healthy and happy, still needed additional support. So
Right.
There's nothing wrong whether you choose systemic HRT or not. Just go get some vaginal estrogen. Estrace is one of the products you can get, the generic form. GoodRx has it for very, very cheap, whether you've got insurance or not. And we would say like the older ladies who just cannot access systemic HRT or are waiting to do it as they search for someone, that vaginal estrogen should be an easy thing to get from their GP or their OB. Start there, and unfortunately we would get into too much, but they give you like a plunger. You don't need that, ladies. It doesn't have to be this messy, awful experience where you're inserting tons of cream in places you don't want to put it. You can just take a little bit and sort of rub it, from end to end in those vaginal tissues. It's going to help with your bladder health. It's going to help with your sexual health. It's just going to help everything down there.
But sadly, I know a lot of doctors were recommending like antibiotics, like an ongoing antibiotic, which what's going to do the gut microbiome and all that. So, but I heard how much we would save in healthcare if we would just give everybody vaginal estrogen.
Yeah. And there's, BV is another one. Bacterial vaginosis is a horrible condition that a lot of women struggle with. And again, it triggers right around perimenopause and into menopause. There's some wonderful vaginal probiotics that actually go through the gut and address those tissues, some beautiful strains, but the vaginal estrogen is usually going to be the needle mover.
Yeah. That's just so fascinating. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about like just writing the book and stuff. Maria, we'll start with you. What was your favorite chapter to write and why?
Probably just because when I discovered this like years and years and years ago, just the chapter that explains all of the effects of estrogen on the different body systems. Because, again, we just want women to know it's not about, babies and breastfeeding and, women, girls becoming, women by getting their hips and forming breasts. And it's the sex hormones that give us those characteristics. It's like, it's so much. It's so relevant.
It's so much. It's the eyes. It's the,
eyes. It's literally the teeth, the gum line, the bones, the skin, the colon. Like, yes, estrogen is so important for your colon. So I really love that chapter. And I hope, women, so we put that early on in the book so women understand.
Chapter 3. And Kristin, what was your favorite chapter?
For me, I'm a little bit of a research history nut. And so I loved going back and looking at the use of hormones in history and understanding that, this is not some medicalization that we're being subjected to by the patriarchy. That's a whole line of, dribble that Marie and I can't stand. But really saying, look, this is not new. Our hormones have been recognized as being so critical to women's health. And we used extracts back in the 600 AD, and we've been using them ever since. And that women should stop being scared of them because they've been misled quite a little bit. And some of that misleading has come out of the motivation of making money for pharmaceutical companies. And, there is a difference. We hear a lot of people saying bioidentical is a marketing term. There's nothing that gets me more fired up than hearing stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, no, it's not. We're recognizing the molecular mimicry of the body and what we made and what we can provide it. And so trying to kind of dive back into those historical details and really educate women so that they kind of let go of that fear that's been built around hormones a little bit. And we try and lead with that and then hit them hard with and by the way, here's what all those things do, as Maria just talked about. And then I think at that point, most women are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Yeah. Why am I going to go through the rest of this life without those if this is all the things that it controls? So,
okay. So on a personal level, what was the biggest change you experienced when you went on your hormone journey?
I know what I'm going to say, but I'm
have to keep this PG. No,
it's the truth. I mean, it's life, right?
Yeah. So I started going into, I was deeply in perimenopause at about 43, 44. And I probably was fully postmenopausal by say 47. But so between one of the earlier symptoms for me, even after having been very fertile in my 20s and 30, was just vaginal dryness. And I was like, what the heck is this? Yeah. And so literally that changed within a week or two.
A week or two?
Week or two. Yeah.
That's good.
And we're talking just systemic on my skin, meant to serve whole body health.
That was not a vaginal estrogen.
No.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, mine was pretty much the same because we have this joke. I literally called Maria 4 days into my first dose and said,
I'm wet.
You look a little juicy down there. What's going on?
I love that you're
so sorry if we're not PG.
No, but here's why I think it's relevant for a lot of women is, we're at a stage of life where we're really tired, right? We're handling a lot of things. Many of us are in the sandwich generation where we've got older parents who need our help or are dealing with crises. Our kids are frequently at the age that this teenage stuff is starting to happen. We're just we're so put upon, and I don't mean to sound like a martyr like that, but I remember I used to joke in my 40s when I went to bed, no one touch me. Please, no one need anything from me at this point.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I have an amazing husband, and he was like, what about me? And you just don't feel like you have anything left to give to people. Yeah. And then B, physically, just not a lot of action happening down there. And so sex lives do start to take a hit during perimenopause. I think we need to be really honest with that, because women start to question, like, is this where my marriage fails?
Right.
Or am I not really into him any longer? Or we start to kind of blame things, right? And we deflect because we're kind of horrified as what's going on. We just don't feel it. We're just not loving it. And I remember my husband, God bless him, and in my 40s, he was like, I'm going to fight for us. Like, what is going on with you? And so for me, when that was the first change, and it wasn't, we're not talking about necessarily libido. Libido does come with estrogen also. It's not a testosterone driven thing. And you have to be jacked on testosterone to get libido benefits. But it's not so much like, oh my gosh, I'm chasing my husband around the house again. It's all of a sudden like, I felt like I had better coping mechanisms. I felt like my outlook in life had turned a little bit more positive. Suddenly my, lady bits were feeling like, oh, okay, yeah, let's open the door again. And that then translated into be able to have great conversations with my husband around this topic. And it literally, everything got better. My parenting got better. My marriage got better, all of those things. And, to trace it down to just some lubrication seems silly, but it really did start with that. And then this kind of like fog lifted.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, wow, I don't hate everyone around me, which I had started to think I did.
That's so funny.
I would say that the second really most important thing, kind of really echoing what Kristin just finished with, is just this sense of like, I can easily tend to be like a brooding, more serious person, and I probably am still that way. I'm just serious. My husband says I have no sense of humor, but then again, he doesn't like my humor.
I argue that you do.
No, my husband's very proper. He doesn't like my sense of humor, which tends to be more bathroom humor. But besides that, I am even toned, and I would even just say happy and just kind of peaceful, and we can figure this out, and just like really joyful for the most part on a day-to-day basis. Of course, every human has moments and dips and little highs, but for the most part, I'm just like an even keel, happy person. And I was not that way between the ages of 43 and 47. And, so, I think like I almost have to stop and recognize, wow, it's been a long time like this. And you have to like think back to what was. And I just would hate to live that way right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your kids are not the ones causing you to be like that.
It's the changes in the brain. They're so profound.
Yeah.
But I want to leave with this though. Do you have to be fully through menopause to go on hormones, or should you start earlier?
Early.
I think that's like a big misconception that, I still have my period. Why would I want to go on hormones?
Well, think about it this way with your followers, because you do so much messaging on metabolic health. Do you have to be fully diabetic in order to address your insulin resistance? Right? Like, why do we give this messaging to women that you need to bottom out, hit the wall, crash and burn, and fall apart before we're going to address this? It's silly, but it's more serious than that from the standpoint of particularly the people looking at the heart health. Mm-hmm. The vascular changes that happen to a woman that usually manifest in late 50s to 60s, meaning we suddenly become aware of them, all start in early peri, and they accelerate as a woman goes through peri. Wouldn't we want to head that off at the pass and prevent it from happening? So that piece of it is where we look at this as, you want to talk about longevity and biohacking and all these things. Hormone replacement and hormone restoration is the ultimate biohack, because you actually can prevent these things from happening. Mm-hmm. And that's why it just frustrates us that a lot of these doctors are like telling 57-year-old women who still have, let's say, a cycle every 4 to 7 months. Mm-hmm. You're not in menopause yet. It's not necessary, or you don't need it. We're like, look, she's probably got, as Maria described earlier, a halo effect of a little bit of estrogen, probably more from the adrenals than the ovaries at this point. It's stimulating enough tissue that every once in a while it sheds. And so she has a bleed. This is not a woman who's not menopausal. This definition of menopause being 12 months without a period, completely concocted. There's nothing scientific about it whatsoever. It's just sort of a benchmark that doctors chose. So let's look at what really matters. Menopause should be the moment our sex hormones start to decline. Let's address it then.
I would say the biggest, that whole waiting 12 months to go, to have no period. I'm just going to give you a scenario. You've got a 52, 53-year-old, and we actually see this quite a bit, surprisingly. And she's gone like 6 months without a period, or 8 months, or even 10 months, and then she gets one. And she gets that period. We have a mentor who would even posit that's not even really a normal period. Like at 53, if you get a period after 10 months, like that's kind of abnormal. But regardless of that, so here she has a period after 10 months of not having one. And she like now has mentally reset. Oh, I need to go a year from this period. She is wasting time. She's not, I like to say she's not out of time with regards to beginning HRT, but she does not have a lot of time. So she needs to, she just needs to realize, like, don't, like, ladies, if you have gone 60 days, if you're, say, a woman, let's just say over 45, and you've gone like 60 days without a period, or you're a woman 50 and you've gone 60 days without a period, you are deep into the perimenopause transition, deep.
And the changes have started. They've already started.
Probably years before.
Have endothelial changes in your arteries.
And like you said, some people just, you push through the pain, you push through, you don't realize what's going on because there's so much going on. I'm one that's really in tune to, like my moods, my feelings. I'm a very adventurous person. And I noticed I didn't really want to do anything anymore.
It's so common.
I noticed, I was like, I just don't feel, I used to love to explore and do all this. And I was like, I just don't feel, and I'm grateful I went to a doctor that said, well, let's just check them. Let's see what's going on. And I had a high sex binding globulin thing on my jig. So it was kind of taking
high FSH maybe.
No, highest HBG, probably because of your low carbs. And this is something that can get thrown off in a lab marker, is if a doctor doesn't realize that we don't eat a ton of carbs, that actually can increase sex hormone binding globulin.
I've heard that. And so anyway, once I did start a very low dose, I felt so much better. My moods were so much better. My kids liked me better. Like it was just... I was just grateful I found someone like you guys to say, you don't have to be through menopause to start. You can be like lowering your hormones. Your sleep might, be not so great, whatever. I just feel so much better being on top of it.
Yeah.
I also want to leave with this too. I remember you saying, have your 20-year-old nieces, grandchildren, whatever, get their levels tested when they're feeling great.
Yeah. That, and also know that it's, your ovaries are desperately trying to keep up their jobs when you're in your 40s. And so some months they're going to be struggling, and some months they're going to have a burst. So testing during perimenopause can be very difficult in terms of the volume of sex hormones themselves. But that's why we talk about that follicle stimulating hormone, or FSH. It's a brain hormone. It is responding to what's happening in the background, even if a lab marker can't catch a low estrogen moment. Right. And once that FSH gets above a certain percent or a certain number, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if you're having periods. It does not matter if you have a high estrogen number 1 month in a lab test. It does not matter, ladies. That brain decoupling is the only sign you need. Start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I noticed like stress definitely would change my numbers. And I just, dealing with a lot of stress. So I also had a friend who, when her husband died, I think she was maybe 40, 41. Her husband died and her periods just stopped.
Yep.
And they never came back.
Yep.
And I just said, hey, you might want to, because she was a very even-keeled person. Then she got very stressed out and things would bother her. And I was like, just look into hormones.
Yeah.
Just think about it.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you guys so much for your time. Where can everybody find this?
Any retailer. Amazon's a great place too. We've got a page on our website, wiseandwell.me/book. They can go there. But really, we just want to get it out to women. We understand you mentioned it's expensive sometimes to work with functional practitioners, and we get that. And we wanted to serve women as best as possible. So there's our.
I learned more on this than I did any doctor told me. I'm serious. And it's just like, it will be a reread, and it's not just a one-time read. It's like highlighting stuff like, oh yeah. So, just so much information. I can't thank you enough
Thank you.
creating this. I know it's a hard
Glad you
job
loved
writing the book.
Glad you loved it. Yeah.
Loved it, love it, love it. And we will have the links below where you can get this book, as well as finding Maria and Kristin to consult with them if you are interested in that too. So thanks again so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Maria, for having us.